people come into these classes that already have a site that they're either frustrated with or they're ready for a rebuild. And so I'll definitely talk about that as far as the process of kind of tearing down a current site and rebuilding a new one. But if you have one, if you want to drop it in the chat, feel free to.
All right, we've got 2 minutes. Folks coming in slowly but surely. I'm sure you can see the count.
Yeah.
Can't you?
Of the people.
Yeah. All right, 1 minute left. Looks like right now we're sitting at 14. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do a brief introduction, and then Boomer, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome, everyone, to using WordPress to build a website for your business. I'm Dwayne Adams, Associate Director of the AV Tech Small Business Center. I appreciate you all giving us your support and spending your time with us this afternoon on this webinar. I know there's been a lot of changes lately, and Boomer is one of the instructors who's been gracious enough to work with us in continuing to deliver these programs. So big thank you to Boomer, and been working with him for a number of years. He came into the Small Business Center or the incubator as a participant years ago, back when I think I first started. He was coming on board. How? What?
8 years.
8 years. Yeah, that's about how long I've been with the Small Business Center. So, so I've known Boomer since I started AB Tech, and he's been a great asset, really good guy. Also a counselor, has his own business. So he kind of grew up doing this stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him take it away. So Boomer, I'll make you a co-host, and then I'm going to click out of here. Okay. Thanks, Boomer.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. All right, can everybody see this screen? Somebody give me a heads up in the chat while I get my windows arranged here. All right. Bear with me, I'm gonna try to pull this chat window over. All right, good deal. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining, especially during these hectic times. I know everybody is adjusting and trying to navigate these hectic times. So appreciate you joining. Like Dwayne said, I've been teaching with AB Tech for probably about 6 or 7 years. I jumped into the mix with AB Tech as a tenant in their incubator years ago, and that was a great process. I was there for 3 years, grew my business from about 2 people to I think about 6 people at that time. And the company's called Big Boom Design. Let me go ahead and get this slideshow going here. So I'll do a little bit of intro about me, who I am, the company, not much there, but just at least so you guys know who I am. And then the primary goal here is to get everybody super comfortable with building out a WordPress site. The goal is not necessarily to end the session or the day with a fully functioning, beautiful WordPress website that you can go slap on a business card and promote to the world. The goal is to get everybody comfortable with the process, to walk through the settings, to walk through the themes and plugins, some things that are really important, even if it's just a basic site that you need to set up. And so that's the main goal. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I will try my best not to get too distracted by the chat, and I'll try to kind of answer them in chunks. I always do a couple of disclaimers in this process. I've also got some notes. So one of my disclaimers is the fact that I'm looking at a couple different screens. I've got my laptop right here with the camera going, and then I have a screen up above it that I'm actually going to be looking at a lot of the time. So if you catch me glancing up or staring up there for the majority of this, there's another screen there. So hopefully that's not too distracting. And then I have a notepad over here with the notes that I'm going to be going through. So there's some disclaimers. I will do my best to finish all of my sentences. If I don't, and I leave people hanging, feel free to call it out and bring me back on track there. I try to be linear with this whole process, but the internet and building websites is anything but linear. Often it is, you have to kind of jump between services or pages or sections within WordPress and within other websites, things like that. So bear with me on that one. I'm going to try to talk about some tools that you guys can use to do things like finding keywords, figuring out how people search on Google, some tracking tools. So we are going to talk primarily about WordPress, especially the like 2/3 towards the end of this thing. But the first third, I kind of have to do a little bit of this, a little intro, and then also kind of set the stage and talk about some higher level things related to just building websites in general, not specific to WordPress. So in a minute, we're going to dig into some of those. Feel free to throw some questions in there, and I'll either answer it at that time or towards the end. All right, so as you guys can see on the screen right now, so Big Boom Design is the name of the company. We're about 12 years old at this point, 12 to 13, and we're an educational web design and internet consulting agency. And really what that means in a nutshell is the educational web design piece is built around the fact that, you know, a lot of folks in the web business build their businesses and build websites with a lot of smoke and mirrors, and don't ask us why we did it the way that we did it. You get what you get, here you go. And I thought that when I started the business, I thought that was a really bad way to go about doing this. And I worked for a company prior to starting my own that was built that way. And to me, as at the time a kid that grew up with the internet, I got the internet when I was 12 and started digging in and building websites. I'm 35 now. And so I've been hanging in there for quite a while with this process, and I've watched it evolve considerably, as a lot of us have, but from a website building perspective. So my goal was to make the whole process of building a site educational for everybody involved. Not just for those of you that would hire somebody to build a website and teaching, you know, you guys why we do it, but also I just have a big interest in, you know, every time we get in the mix with a new client, I get this really interesting perspective on their business and everything that they want to tell the world about them and their business. And so through that process, I've been able to kind of dip my toes into a lot of different industries, and that's been a lot of fun personally. So the internet consulting element is the fact that we use a lot of tools to track and analyze what's going on within the website, things like Google Analytics to identify the keywords that send people to the website, some heat mapping tools that we'll look at in a minute that show you where people actually click on your website. So I'm a big fan of trying to make decisions about the design, the pages, the content, the navigation based on the tools and not just based on opinion. And so we have all these tools, we might as well use them. So we assess the situation, we come up with a plan, we develop pieces that go into it, we implement those pieces in. We track that process both in time and feedback and things like that. And then we educate our clients, our team, everybody that was involved about how it went and how it could go better next time and that kind of stuff. In a nutshell, we fix websites for a living. This picture is slightly dated. There's about 7 of us now. We're all locally based in and around Asheville, although right now everybody is obviously working from home. We have adjusted, I like to think that we've adjusted to this pandemic from a remote work environment a little bit easier than most have, just because we're a group of techies. And so we already have the hardware and the software and some of the knowledge to do that. So it's been a really interesting process over the past couple of months to watch everybody kind of adjust. But we fix websites, and we fix specifically WordPress websites. So if anybody in the mix, has anybody in the mix ever taken a class from me? If you want to put something in the chat, just let me know if you have. If you have, thanks for coming back. If not, hopefully you hang in there. So the reason I bring that up is I go through this slide every time I teach a class. There are 6 bullets on the screen right now, and they're ordered specifically in this order, in this hierarchy. And it's in my opinion, I think these 6 bullets are important to cover for anybody that's about to enter into this process of building or rebuilding your own website, or helping somebody build a site, or being voluntold that you need to build the site for a company that you might be involved with. And that happens quite a bit. So again, the goal here is to get everybody kind of comfortable with WordPress, whether or not it's a brand new site that you want to build, it's a site that you want to rebuild, or it's the site that you are adopting. And so once we get kind of deeper into this, there's probably going to be some questions about specific sites that some of you may be involved with that might be a little too specific for your site and a little, and not generic enough, I guess. And so if that's the case, feel free to email me. I'll go ahead and throw this out now in case I forget later, but Boomer, BOOMER, at bigboomdesign.com, and I'll put that in the chat as well. But if there are specifics that you either want to have addressed, but you don't want to dump it into the chat, or you want to follow up later, feel free to do that. Emails in the chat. All right, so I'm going to work through these bullets. I'm going to try to do my best to keep it brief and do it quickly, but some of these are very, very important. So in my opinion, everything in this process starts with this first bullet, and it is understand what people are searching for. And to dig a little bit deeper into that, what I specifically mean there is we all want to build a website to essentially to get people there. The reason why we want people there is different, but a website without traffic doesn't really serve a lot of purpose. I do have some folks that have taken classes and they say, I just want to build a blog, or I just want to build a site to collect my own digital stuff, my own projects, my own content, and that's totally fine. So I don't want to, if anybody in the mix right now is not trying to drive a lot of traffic to their site, sorry if I offend you by that, but most people want to generate, build a website to generate traffic. The reason why people want to do that is anything from, it's going to be an e-commerce site, so you're going to sell products on that site. It could be a blog where you might want to generate traffic and then sell advertisements and make money through those ads. And it could be a service-based business where, you know, you're a landscaper or some type of delivery, or, you know, like Dwayne was talking about, like an exterminator, where you want people to contact you and then you'll go to their place. And the last and probably the most common is you have a brick and mortar business that you want to drive traffic into. Obviously, with the timing of COVID right now, a lot of businesses are shut down. And so maybe you have a twofold purpose. Maybe it is to set up a site to eventually drive traffic to your brick and mortar that might unfortunately be closed right now. And then other people might want to be thinking about, you know, what can you do to sell your product or your service online right now? And that kind of dips into the e-commerce part. So what does it mean to understand what people are searching for? I specifically mean, what are people Googling? What are the folks that would potentially be searching for your product or your service, but they don't know that you are the company or you are the person? What are they searching for? And so this concept is called a long tail term. And a long tail term is how we all search online. We don't necessarily call it that often, but what we've done over the past 20 years or so is we've kind of learned how to interact with the internet and Google more specifically, is we craft these long tail terms. And so the goal, or I guess the homework, if I were going to give anybody homework in this mix, it is to identify 20 long tail terms for your business. So what's a long tail term compared to a short tail term? So a long tail term is something that is niche specific. It is unique. It is maybe 4 to 5, maybe 6 words strung together. It can be formatted in the form of a sentence, or it can be just individual words kind of dumped into a Google search. It doesn't have to be 5 or 6 words. It could be shorter, could be 2 or 3 if your business to service is a little bit more unique. One of the things that, that it took me about a decade to find within my own business was the term Asheville Internet Consultant. It's unique, it's got a geographic location tied to it, and it also speaks to kind of a higher level of client that I might want to attract. I wouldn't want to go after something like cheapest web designer in town. So when you craft your list of long tail terms, you want to be specific to the products and services that you actually do offer and the ones that you want to grow with. But then also you want to make sure that it is something that is unique. And so a lot of times you can just add a geographic location to that to help out, or you can kind of further define what your actual service is. All right, some good questions coming in. Sandra, what's the MLM? Multi-level marketing, is that right? And then the credit repair industry, yes, totally. What I'd like to do is we'll go through a couple of these scenarios as we kind of jump into some of these tools, and I've already got one of these websites that was dumped in here earlier. I think it's the food delivery or the produce delivery. I've got that one pulled up with a couple tools. So yeah, we'll dig into a few of these. So understand what people are searching for, identify 20 long tail terms, and you should literally have a piece of paper. You can do this now if you want, next to your desk, next to your computer. And I say 20, but really that list should never stop growing and evolving. You should weed some out over time and you should add some new ones in. And those keywords need to infiltrate everything that you do. And I'll talk more about that once we get into this. So the next bullet on here is to build a solid foundation. We're going to specifically be talking about WordPress, and I'm a huge fan of WordPress. We'll talk a lot about WordPress in the next couple hours, but some highlights here. It's free, which is always great. You just have to host it somewhere. It is open source, which means the source code is completely open to anybody who wants to dig into it. There are 60 to 70,000 plugins out there that are free that can extend the functionality. There's hundreds of thousands of themes out there, and it's 35% of the internet. And while that's a big stat, that's by far the #1 platform, it got there for a good reason, for those reasons that I just listed off. And so, a lot of times people say, well, how is it different than Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or Shopify or BigCommerce or GoDaddy's tools? And the biggest thing is that it's not proprietary. WordPress is not owned by anybody as far as the actual code. There is a company that's back behind it that kind of supports it, but it's free, which is great. And so it's the #1 platform that people have been building on for about, I want to say 17 years now. It's been around. And for the first 6 to 7 to 8 years, it was not #1, but it has gotten there now. So it is a very solid foundation to build on. There's a big knowledge base out there, so you can always kind of go and find folks, whether it's in a coffee shop or at a university or professionally online, that can help out with them. Next in the mix, before I move on to that one, that CMS, I try to always explain all my 3-letter acronyms or acronyms in the mix. And so CMS is Content Management System. So WordPress started as a little blogging platform years and years ago, and it has grown up into a full-blown content management system. All right, next on here is track your visitors with Google Analytics. And so Google tracks everything. That is their mission, to track everything. Every bit of data that they can possibly get their hands on, they will track it, and they will figure out how to make money from it. Love it or hate it, that's the world we live in. And so Google Analytics is a tool that they have that is free to use. And they're going to track all the website data. So if you can track anything related to your own web presence, you might as well do that. You should take advantage of that. And so you can go to, I want to say it's analytics.google.com, and don't quote me on that, but you can just search for the word analytics also, and it'll be the #1 thing. And so you can sign up for an account. If you have a Gmail address, you already have an account. You just have to generate the tracking code and just add it to your website. And I'll show you how to do that once we get into actually building the site out. There's a really simple WordPress plugin that'll let you add that code. Next on the list is to carve out a niche. And this kind of builds upon that first bullet. And what I mean by carve out a niche is you should use these long tail terms to really define your product and your service and how it's unique compared to your competitors. So one of the things that I've discovered over the years of working with a lot of different clients in different industries is that the more we understand about our business and our industry, the worse we are at guessing these terms. And I'm talking about these long tail terms. And so no offense to anybody, myself included in this mix, but we know too much. We know too many terminology within our industry and within our business. And so we assume that people search the way that we search for our own stuff, our own services and products. And so I'll give you an example. I've been using this example for years because I like it a lot. And I had a client early on in business that she was a chiropractor. And I said, what do you want to be #1 on Google for? Like what term, long tail term? And she said, back, Sublette Station, Asheville, North Carolina. And that was a really interesting response that I thought. It's specific. It's very, very, very specific. It's too specific. I, at this point, understand what a back Sublette Station is, but at the time, I had a painful back, and I didn't know why, and I didn't even know that a chiropractor was the person I needed to find to help solve the problem. I didn't know if it was acupuncture, massage therapy, or chiropractor, and I never would have searched for the words back Sublette Station. I would have searched for back pain, Asheville, maybe chiropractor, Asheville, if I had learned enough at that point. So carving out a niche is important, but you can go a little too far with it. You can dig a little bit too deep to the point that nobody's actually searching for that. So that's the balance, is a long tail term that's niche specific, and those are the types of terms that you should stack up on that list. The best way to find those long tail terms are, the easiest way is just to go to Google and start typing. The autocomplete exists because that's what people actually search heavily. And I literally mean you can go to google.com, start typing in something, and it will try to autofill based on the most popular searches. So that's a good place to start. Google Analytics is another great place to get that info. You can ask friends, family, existing clients or customers. Ask folks that are a little bit like one step removed from knowing a lot about your business. So carving out a niche is a really important thing, especially as your business evolves. You really want to define who you serve and more importantly, who you might not serve. Crafting your design, and there's a tool out there called Crazy Egg. There's also another one called a Hotjar. I'm going to put that one into the chat here because I don't have it on any of these slides, but Hotjar and Crazy Egg are two tools that will let you do what's called a heat map. And in a second, I have slides that show the Crazy Egg heat maps and some logos for the others, but the heat map one is an interesting one. It basically shows you, I'll go ahead and jump to it if I can. Bear with me. Hopefully that's showing up on the screen right now. So this is a screenshot. This is a really old website, but from years ago, but it illustrates a good example of how this tool is used. So essentially it shows you where people are clicking on the website. So wherever there's like a brighter color and a hot spot, that's where the heavy activity is. So we can see that the slider is actually being used. We've got the forward and backward. We've got this main focal point right here. And that's all on the left. And then over on the right, we can see this is the scroll map. So it shows us where people scroll down to. And so this area right here, this bright white section in the center is the primary visible area. It's where everybody's scrolling down to and clicking. And so we specifically put this cabins and condos button in the hotspots, because that's the primary goal of this website, is to drive traffic to that cabins and condos section. Let me jump back to that last bullet. All right, and so then the last one on here, I will mention that SEMrush and Crazy Egg are not free. The SEMrush is kind of expensive, but Crazy Egg is relatively cheap, and I've heard that Hotjar is a little bit cheaper. I've just been invested with Crazy Egg for years, so I'm stuck there. Not really, but I'm complacent with that tool. The very last thing on here is spend wisely with Google AdWords. And I say spend wisely very intentionally. Google AdWords is a very powerful tool. It can, especially with a brand new website, with a brand new domain name, it can be a huge asset, and you can spend just a little bit of money and get a lot of really great results. But on the flip side, you can spend a lot of money and get close to no results. So it's not something that you should just jump into and throw some money at until you've worked your way through these other 5 bullets. That's why I put this at the very end. It is really important that you definitely want to have tracking in place. You want to have some understanding of your audience, whether or not they're on phones, tablets, or laptops or desktops. You want to understand physically, like geographically, where are these people located? Because all these factors you can really dial in with AdWords, and the more you understand about your traffic, the devices that they're on, the pages that they go to, the keywords they're searching for, the cheaper it is for you to use AdWords, and the more effective those ads actually are. So I teach a class, a 3-hour class, which will probably be trimmed to 2 based on the webinar aspect, but I teach a 2-hour class on Google Analytics, as well as a separate one on Google AdWords. And you should take them in that order. The analytics class is a very good baseline to have before you go into the AdWords campaign. I've got a quick little story about AdWords. Years ago, I had a client call me in like 9 or 10 o'clock at night over and over and over again until I finally picked up the phone. And he said frantically, "Boomer, you have to help me. I just spent $2,000 in the past hour and I don't know how to make it stop." And he jumped into Google AdWords. He's a very smart, successful businessman. He just happened to set up his AdWords campaign, and he just didn't read the instructions well enough. And the 2 things that he missed were, it said, "What's your daily budget?" And he, for some reason, saw, "What's your monthly budget?" So he put in $10,000. So he was going to burn through $10,000 that day if he hadn't called. The other thing that he did was he didn't define the geographic region that he wanted to run the ads for. So he was running ads for 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments for rent across the entire country. And he runs a property management company up in Boone. And so he was running ads in LA and New York and Boston and Atlanta and every bigger city than Boone within the United States. And so the cost per click, he was getting charged insane amounts because it was going to try to burn through that $10,000 budget. So I say that not to call out that client of mine, and he's still a client and a great client, but just read the instructions. And Google AdWords has made it easier to jump on board over the years, but at the same time, they made it easier because they want you to spend your money with them. So you just be careful with it. And I would encourage you to go watch some YouTube videos, come and take the class that I teach on it before you really jump headfirst into AdWords, or just take $50 and just go see what it's all about. Okay. Any questions, toss them into that chat. I'm going to click through some of these slides. I mentioned to Dwayne earlier that a lot of the classes that I teach are live demos. And so the fact that all these things have been moved to a digital atmosphere, digital version is a slight challenge for me, because I really rely on seeing the folks in the class, the reactions, whether or not people are hanging with me, whether they're getting completely lost or they're really with it. And so I do a lot of live demo, and because of that, things move quickly at times. We are recording this, which is good. The other aspect that's a little difficult for me is that we're going to be building a website. And normally when I do this, I'm teaching in a classroom. and there's a projector with a screen up front. And then a lot of people bring their laptop so that they can actually build a site alongside of us. The problem is that most of you, I'm guessing, thanks. Most of you are probably just looking at one screen right now, is my guess. Some of you might have two screens, but it's really difficult to have you guys build a website alongside of me, because you'll be essentially flipping away to another screen. You'll miss what I've just done. You'll come back, you'll be lost, and then the frustration just builds from there. So luckily we're recording this one, and so you can go back and watch it. The other thing that I want to pause for a second and mention is that every time I teach a WordPress class, I give every attendee a website to build. And so I'm going to keep that offer on the table. But because of this, I'm going to need you, if you do want your own WordPress, it's called a sandbox site or a dev site, development site. If you want a site to play around with, send me an email, and I will, I'll spin up a site for you. I'll send you the link, and you can go ahead and get logged in, and you can then maybe watch the video that we're going to record over the next little bit, and then you can go and take care of those, you know, the process of actually building the site. So there's a question, is there a way to see the whole chat and not just what I've typed in? I think that if you, I'm not sure, that is interesting. I do know that I can save the entire chat. One thing you could do potentially is at the bottom right of the chat window, there's three little buttons, three little dots. If you click on that, make sure that it's set to all panelists and attendees. And I think maybe that'll help. The other thing is that when we get to the very end of this, I will save the entire chat so that you can get that. Oh, and the other thing I'm just noticing is that some of you are sending a message directly to the panelists, and then the others are the panelists and the attendees. So when you actually send in a message, assuming you want the whole group to see it, make sure that it's shown this way. And so I actually think that mine were not. Hopefully everybody can see that message that I just put in there. It says Hotjar. I'm also going to put in, thanks for calling that out. I had no idea that I was basically just texting to Dwayne only. All right, so yes, cool. All right, I got those back in there now. Okay, so recap on what I just said there. If anybody wants a WordPress development site to build out from scratch, you're going to be starting at the exact same spot that we're going to start at here in a minute. I'll send me an email directly. So boomer@bigboomdesign.com. Just say, hey, I'm on the chat right now. I'm on the webinar. I would like a site. And then after this is over, I'll go ahead and send you, I'll spin up a version of it, and I'll send you your own login. It'll be your own unique site for you to go through the motions that we're about to go through. Again, it is not something that once you get to the end of it, you'll be able to like point a domain name to it. But it is something that you could take a backup of, and you could move it and then host that somewhere. And so we're getting ready to, this next little bit that we're going to talk about is hosting and domains and stuff like that. You can, the question from Sandra, yeah, you can use your own site to build, to continue to build it out. That's totally fine. Hopefully this next little bit's going to clarify some of the sticking points, I guess, some of the nuances within building a site out. Everything should be, for the most part, linear up until the point where we start looking at themes and plugins. With building a site, once you get into themes and plugins, that's where everything kind of goes, it just goes. It goes in different directions, both when I teach this in person as well as digitally. It's nice to be in person where I can actually like walk around the room and help people with their specific issue, because for instance, you might go and load a plugin that nobody else in the room loaded, and then you've got a specific issue with that plugin, and I can kind of work through those. So that's a challenge, you know, once we get into the theme and plugin side of stuff. I paid $600 to someone to build mine. It looks like crap. Will I be able to change it myself? Yes. So The look and feel of the site is controlled by the theme. We're going to get into all that kind of stuff. And yeah. So the next little bit before, my goal is to wrap up this next little bit that I'm about to do in about 15 minutes. And I think I can do it because I want to allow just over an hour to actually do the actual build out and then some questions as well. So I'm bummed. The one thing I could criticize about WordPress is the fact that they have not created a video for people like me that teach WordPress that helps to simplify the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org. And so because of the lack of video that WordPress has produced, I have to stumble through this over the next 7 to 10 minutes or so. But it does allow me to talk about a few important things. And the most important thing there is hosting. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org. And at this time, I'm going to, I need to jump over here. Bear with me. I've lost my chat. There's the chat came back. And all right. Oh, looks like that one. Okay, so hopefully everybody can still see my screen. I've switched away from the PowerPoint temporarily over to a browser. So there are two sites. There's WordPress.com and WordPress.org. And for the most part, they're the same platform. The big difference, and the reason why I bring this up is because if I don't bring this up, everybody's going to get off this at 5 and go to WordPress.com, and that's not what you should do. And you would do that just because .com is what governs the internet for the most part, for the most part. But WordPress.com, and we'll start there because it's simpler to talk about and we can kind of blast through it a little bit quicker. WordPress.com is essentially WordPress with training wheels. It is WordPress, and you can set up a site, and it is free. But they limit what you're able to put onto that website. For instance, there's 3 big things here. You can't sell anything, so you can't do ads or e-commerce, and probably half the folks in the mix right now on this call want to do one of those 2 things. You can't load any plugins, which is why you can't sell anything, because there's no e-commerce capability. And a plugin essentially expands the functionality of the site. And then the third thing is that you can't load any theme that you want. And the theme is really what makes the site look a certain way. And so if you really want like a professional looking site, you either need to learn some CSS and HTML and PHP, which nobody should go and do that because you don't need to. Or you just need to be able to find a theme that was built well. And there are free themes that are built kind of well. There are paid themes out there that are built kind of well. And then there's paid themes that are built really, really well. And so one of the important things is that you do want the ability to go and find themes and plugins that fit your needs. And so you can't do that with WordPress.com. WordPress.com, again, is WordPress with training wheels. I've had a couple people in classes over the years that have worked with WordPress.com and have never bumped up against that barrier or that threshold, but almost all of them do. And I've got a lot of people that come take this WordPress class that say, I started a site on WordPress.com and I can't sell anything. I'm like, yeah, I know. You got to go to WordPress.org. Now, so Molly just said, oh no, so what do I do if I have a .com? And so this is a good question. And I want to stress the fact that Your domain name has nothing to do with whether or not you have a .com or a .org WordPress site. And that's a little confusing, but essentially, think of it as like two different highways, and you're either on the WordPress.com highway or you're on the WordPress.org highway. The vehicle that you're in is irrelevant, and the vehicle in this sense is your domain name. You can get a domain name that's a .com, .net, .org, .co, .anything, and you can go either the WordPress.com or WordPress.org route. So the domain name is not super specific. So if you do have a WordPress.com site and you have gone that route, that's okay. It is easier to transition than if you'd have gone in the route of like Wix or Weebly or Squarespace. If you log into your WordPress.com site, there is a section called Tools or Settings, and then underneath that, there's a button that says Export. And that will let you export all of your pages and posts and users and images and links and everything that you've done. And then you can transition over to a WordPress.org site. So that's WordPress.com. The only benefit to WordPress.com is that you don't have to host it. So you don't have to have hosting anywhere. So from this point moving forward, we're going to be talking about WordPress.org, which is what we're going to build on. It's what all of the big WordPress sites out on the internet are built on. And it is essentially WordPress without any training wheels. You can literally do anything that you can think of. You can build the biggest and best website. You can build a tiny little blog. You can build anything in between. And the interface is the same regardless of what your goals are with the site. So WordPress.org is the route that we're going to go. And the other thing that I want to mention is that you don't actually need to go to WordPress.org to start the process. You actually want to go to a hosting company. Okay. Can we use e-commerce on WP.com with the paid option? Yeah, you can. They have, over the past year and a half or so, WordPress.com has rolled out some add-ons that you can do where you can get the ability to have certain plugins in place and some like tech support help. And they did that because there were so many people that went the .com route, spent a lot of time and a lot of money, and then did not accept the fact that they can't do all these things that they thought they'd be able to do. So they eventually rolled out some plans that you can upgrade and pay to have some plugins. But for the most part, if you already know that you want to build something with plugins and themes, just start with the WordPress.org route, and then you'll never have to pivot away from there. So I'm going to use GoDaddy as an example, not because I like them, not for any other reason other than they're the biggest out there. They are the McDonald's of the hosting and domain world. They've been around since the beginning. If anybody on this Zoom call has a domain name, it's probably with them. Your email might be set up with them. I use them because, again, they're the cheapest, they're the fastest, but they're not necessarily the best out there. Whatever hosting company you want to go with is totally fine. My advice is to pick up the phone and call them. If you go onto the website, you have no real understanding of the customer service, the wait time to get through to somebody, call them. And if you have a bad experience on the phone, it's not going to get better. So GoDaddy's a decent one if you wanted to do that. Another one that I can talk about is Siteground.com. Siteground is also a very quality company. Let me jump back over to the GoDaddy side. And to get back on track here, the reason why I said you don't need to go to WordPress.org to start this process is because WordPress is so big. It's now 36% of the internet. I saw that when we went to their site. All of the hosting companies out there offer WordPress hosting. So if I'm over on the WordPress hosting specific to GoDaddy and I scroll down, I have these 4 plans available, and then there's more plans down below this. Squarespace, here's a question in the chat. Squarespace is a totally different platform. It's proprietary. You have to host it with them. You have to pay their fees, and essentially your content and everything is owned by them, which is one of the problems with all of these platforms out there that aren't open source. So Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, they're all proprietary platforms that are built. They all have their pros and cons, but for the sake of this, to me, to be able to have full ownership over that site and know that if a hosting company, if their customer service goes bad, I can always back up my site and move it somewhere else. If Squarespace has an issue or an outage, you got to wait for them to figure it out. So on the hosting options within GoDaddy, and then all the different hosting companies are going to have WordPress hosting. They will take care of the setup for you. So we've got 4 plans on the screen right now. The one thing that I'll point out here is that all of them only support one website. So if you do have plans of building multiple sites out, you might want to think about one of their other plans, which is down here they say for 5 websites, check out our pro plans. That starts at $25 a month. If I go back up to these 4, you don't need anything fancy. This basic plan is perfectly fine. All of these stats are fine. The one thing that I will mention is that with this ultimate plan, this $12.99 a month plan, they do offer an SSL. And an SSL is, for anybody taking notes on all the acronyms, SSL is a secure socket layer, but basically it's a level of security that gets attached to your website. And it is an important thing to have these days. Google a couple years ago came out and said, every website should have an SSL. Doesn't matter if you're selling products or not, the web should be more secure than it is, and I completely agree with that. So this higher level does come with a free SSL that's going to be built in. And then the other thing that's a pretty nice feature here is this one-click testing site. And so that's really nice because you could, for instance, build your site out here, and then you could get it to a certain point, you could clone it with one click, and then you can play around with that clone. And then whenever it's looking good and doing what it needs to, then you can deploy that clone on top of your other site. So you only get one live website, but you get 2 versions in a sense. You have your live website, and then you have your staging site. Any thoughts on Bluehost? Came in through the chat. Bluehost has stepped up their game considerably over the years, especially when it comes to WordPress. 7 or 8 years ago, I could not have said that. But they very actively played a very active role in upgrading all their WordPress sites up to the newer version, working directly with WordPress to try to make their systems faster. So these days, Bluehost is a far more reputable company than they ever were. Over on the Siteground side, again, WordPress hosting, they have similar plans down here. They're going to give you a free SSL at a much lower level. And the reason why they do that is because GoDaddy actually sells SSLs, whereas a lot of other folks, hosting companies, they'll use free SSLs, and that's perfectly fine. And then last one here is Bluehost. And there is no shortage of hosting companies out there. There are thousands. And so again, if anybody's got questions about, which one you should go with, feel free to let me know. WordPress hosting here. The other note that I'll say is that some people are concerned and are worried that they shouldn't have their domain name and their hosting at the same spot. I disagree with that. I get into too many situations where people's services are scattered all over the place. We adopt clients that they're paying 6 different companies and they can't even tell us what each company is doing. And in a lot of cases, a few of those could be eliminated without losing any services. It's too easy for web designers to not clean up the mess and just to continue to point to the next service. And so it's better to clean things up from the get-go, even if it means your site going down for an hour or a day or something like that. It's better to do that than to be paying some company for years potentially. But again, just last little bit on that, call the company. Whoever it is that you go with, just call them, talk to them, make sure, ask them the questions, ask them what happens if my website crashes. and just see what they have to say. And say, you know, they'll rattle off something about services that they have and backups and uptime monitoring and all these different things. So we host personally at Big Boom Design, we host about 280 websites. We host those with a company called Siteground is one of them, and then Liquid Web is another company, but Liquid Web is more of like an enterprise level. We host hundreds of sites there, and we pay thousands of dollars to have that like really dedicated server. So they're a great company, but only if you've got like 5 to 10 sites and you've got 100 to 200 bucks a month to spend on hosting those 5 to 10. Okay, got through. That was 19 minutes-ish of WordPress.com, WordPress.org difference, hosting stuff, domains. The last little thing I want to say about domains, because this is always a question, and so I'll bring it up before anybody asks it, is how do you pick a domain name? A lot of you probably already have a domain name, but if you don't, here's a couple things. First off, don't be a domain hoarder. Don't just start buying domain names. There's no need to get the .com, .net, .org version of your domain name. Buy one, build something quality. Don't get roped into hundreds of dollars a year, thousands of dollars a year renewing domain names. It's okay to have a few if you want that forward to that primary one, especially if the name of your business is hard to spell or complicated, then get something shorter and forward it. But just pick one. And how do you pick one? There's 3 main criteria that I tell people, and it is as short as possible, keyword rich, so contains keywords that relate to your business and relate to your list of long tail terms, and then easy to spell. Easy to spell is less of a concern these days because most of us just Google something and then Google sends us there. But for putting it on a business card, or if you're just, you know, like if you meet somebody and you rattle it off, it just needs to be easy to spell. Don't try to get clever with dashes, hyphens, weird spellings of things. You don't need to go down that route. For instance, for us, we're Big Boom Design. Some people just assume that it's Big Boom Designs with an S. And so I have Big Boom Designs, and that forwards over to Big Boom Design. And then I also have Boomer at Big Boom Designs that forwards over to the non-S version. There was enough people, it happened once or twice a year where folks said, I sent an email and I said I didn't get it. And then I asked them to, you know, take a picture, and then I was like, well, you spelled it wrong. And that's not their fault. So you can, you know, have a couple of domain names if you need to take care of things like that. Okay, so that's hosting, domains. I think we're ready to actually dig into the site here. So let me give you a little, let me pause for a second and read this. Yeah, so we're setting up a WordPress.com website and already paid for a year. If we export, then we just paid the hosting fees through someone else like GoDaddy, then build the site through WordPress.org after exporting. Yes, yes. And I would, you can go ahead and get hosting somewhere and get WordPress set up. And they actually, in the setup process, and I know that GoDaddy does this, I'm not sure if the other companies do as well, but they will migrate your site for you. That is true also if you're just moving from one hosting company to another. They want your business and they will do what it takes to get you moved over. And so whether you're migrating a .org site from another hosting company or moving a .com site from WordPress, they will help you with that process. I do 3 things: massage, breathwork, and psychology. I was just going to use my name as my domain name, something like. Good question. So the question is, if you have multiple services that you offer, should you create one website with all of them or different websites with different ones? I typically, like 80 to 90% of the time, will tell people create one website. One website, organize it all on there, clearly define your services. The one exception to that is if your services aren't the same. If they're not by the same, I guess I mean if the services aren't similar. If you do, you know, we've got a client that does massage therapy, Reiki, and acupuncture. Those are all relatively close enough that they can all share one website, and you can create one cohesive brand around that. But if you're doing, I don't even know, if you're doing like, you know, home food delivery and auto repair, or, you know, Terminex type stuff, like don't mix really different services on the same site. Try to keep those things separate. So, and work on one at a time. That's another big thing I'll mention. Don't try to tackle a learning curve with multiple websites, even if they're all using the same theme and same plugin, because as you guys see in a minute, once we get into this, content is the hardest part of building a website. Building a website is not that difficult. Getting it to look good and function exactly like you want it to is difficult. But just building a site and getting something up and running is not that challenging. Crafting content, especially quality content that Google cares about and people want to read, that is the true essence, art, science mixture of actually building a website. What I have here is a big giant multi-site. It's a WordPress multi-site. And what that means is I have all of these different websites. Hopefully you guys can see the screen right now. All these different websites, all set up inside of this one website. This is not a normal thing. This is just something that I use to teach, so that if I'm in a room with 20 or 30 people, I can spin up 20 or 30 websites, assign a certain person to a certain site, that becomes their site. So as you can see across the top tab here, I have April 1, April 2, April 3, and what I did just before this, just in anticipation for people wanting their own websites, is I went ahead and started the process of cloning these things out. So if you do want your own testing site to play with after the Zoom call, send me an email. I think I've already gotten a couple of them. I'm trying to not look at all the little pop-ups that are happening, but I will send you a link, and it'll look like this. It'll be WordPress 101.DT3A7HWX-liquidwebsites.com/April 1, April 9, April 12. Those are not dates. Those are just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as I spin those up. And so you'll get one of those, and you'll be able to go and log in to that specific site, and you'll be able to build out whatever you want to build out. You can put plugins and themes, you can load your pages, and you can build out the site that you have envisioned. And then once that's done, you can either then go repeat that whole process somewhere else, wherever it's hosted, or if you want, you can take a backup and you can move it over to somewhere else. So if you really build out what you want to go live with, or what you want to take to GoDaddy or Bluehost, you can do that. I'm going to show you how to use a plugin towards the end of this that will let you kind of migrate that website away. Okay, so for the sake of less stuff on the screen, I'm going to trim down a few things here, and I'm going to pluck this out. Okay. If we do have time towards the end, I really do want to show you just a glimpse at SEMrush. Is the tool that I mentioned earlier. It's what was just on the screen from that other website from somebody that was in the chat. But it's a really cool tool that just gives you kind of a better glimpse, like a visual of the whole long tail term aspect that I talked about. Okay, so if this is anybody's first time seeing WordPress, I'm going to go slow in this first little bit, and then we're going to speed up as we move along. Again, if I move too quickly, if I leave you hanging on a certain thought, let me know, just comment. I'll try to circle back around to it. I'm also going to try really hard to not click on stuff without saying what I'm clicking on and why I'm clicking on it. Especially if you are glancing down, if you're taking notes, if you're looking at your phone or whatever, and you glance back up and I'm on some new screen, that sucks. I get it. So I will do my best to move slowly, especially early on as we kind of navigate, because the first stuff that I talk about is the most important stuff. And then as we get towards the end, it's not less important, but you can get there eventually and it's okay. I teach probably 20 to 30 of these WordPress classes a year at different community colleges. And then I teach one big seminar, one big conference every year called WordCamp. This is the first year in 6 years that we're not going to have it because of COVID. And that's a bummer. But at that conference, I teach 100 people all at the same time, all in the same room, how to build 100 different websites. And I can tell you that once you get towards the end of the day, everybody's tired, stressed out, and everybody's website has gone off in such a different direction. It becomes a big, big, big challenge. So I've structured this presentation very specifically to cover the basics first, and then we ramp up to the more advanced things. All right. So the main thing that I want to show you is just right off the bat, the way that you would navigate the site. And so right now I'm logged into the website, but I'm going to go ahead and log out. And I'm just going to go back to the website. And so the reason that I set the site up the way that I did is because this is the exact same kind of snapshot in time, in a sense, that you would get if you went directly to GoDaddy or Bluehost or any of these hosting companies and said, hey, sign me up for hosting, set up WordPress, and give me access. You will get an email that's going to have a link. It's going to be different than the one that's on my screen, but it's going to be similar. It'll be like a convoluted alphanumeric link because you don't have a domain name that's pointed to it yet. So you'll get a link, and then in that email, they'll probably also give you the login link. But if they don't, it is WP for WordPress, WP-admin. And so to get to the login screen, regardless of what WordPress site you're logging into, it's always going to be WP-admin. And then that will redirect you to this long convoluted thing, but don't worry about that. It should give you a pop-up with this little login screen. When you set up your site with GoDaddy or whoever, you'll probably also be prompted to pick a username and a password, and that's what you'll put in right here. It might be your email address and a password. So when I log in, I am presented with a handful of little white boxes here. This is the dashboard. This is the, I'll call it the dashboard, the admin side, the back side. They're all the same thing. It is the interface that you as an administrator interact with. If I want to see what the users, what the visitors see, I can come up here and I can click on the name of the site. Okay, so in this case, base, because it's the base of the clone that I've created. Base, by clicking on that, it takes me to the front of the site. You can see the name right there. And the important thing here is that that admin bar, that black bar up at the top, stays with me. As long as I stay logged in, that admin bar is going to be pinned at the top. And that admin bar, because I have a multi-site, gives me this. You will not have the my site. You'll just have, that'll be gone. It'll just start with the name of the site. You'll have customize, comments, and then you have this new menu item that gives you a drop down for some other things. And then over on the far right, you'll have the ability to log out or jump back to your profile, things like that. But the important thing is that clicking on the name of the site takes you between the front and the back. And I'm just going to click on this a couple times till everybody gets this. If I'm on the back side and I click on this, it takes me to the front and vice versa. Jumps between the two. I typically like to open up the front of the website on one tab and the back of the website on another tab. So I just held down the control key, I clicked on it, and now I've got two tabs. For the sake of this presentation and the simplicity of keeping one tab, I'm going to close this, but just a little kind of level 2 tip here. If you're comfortable with multiple tabs, do that. Or better yet, if you have two screens, put the front side on one screen and the back side on the other screen. It keeps you from having to navigate away from whatever you're messing with on the admin side. All right, so the first thing that you might need to do, I'm going to go ahead and mention this because you'll probably only do this one time, is you might set up a user. So I just came down here and about halfway down, there's a users tab. And right here, we can see that there's 3 users already in the system, 2 of them are set up as me, and then one of them is this test account that if you want your own site, I'll send you this, and I'll basically recycle this account and give it to you, and I'll make it unique to your email address, and I'll send you a password for it. But you can set up different users. That could be people on your staff, that could be husband or wife, that could be a kid, that could be any contractor or company that you might hire. It is an important thing to not just hand over your username and password. That's true about everything way past just WordPress, especially these days online. Don't be emailing passwords, it's not secure. But if you're going to bring somebody else into the mix under your site, create a username and password specific to them. And that's because you can roll back changes that were done by that user. You can delete that user and then allocate all that content that they might have created to you. So it's good to keep settings and content specific to the user that created it. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is jump back to the front of the site. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to come up to this new section up top, and I'm going to go to new page. So one of the things that is, I think, a little frustrating for new folks that are learning WordPress is that there's a lot of different ways to do the same task. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. There's like 3 ways to create a new page, and 3 ways to make a new post, and 2 ways to set up a new user. And they all point to the same end result. They all point to the same spot. Those 3 ways to create a page all go to the exact same spot. They do this intentionally, and that's because they don't know exactly how people want to navigate. And we all navigate very differently. And so the redundancies might seem overly redundant, but they're there by design. And so I'll show you some of those in just a minute. But going back to what I said a few minutes ago about content being the most important thing, I'm going to show you the process that I think is the best route to take for building out a site. I show you this because this is how we as professionals do this. We build this out this way, and so I want to walk you through the same process. We've tried it a lot of different ways, and this seems to be the most straightforward and best way. And specifically what I'm talking about is make your pages first. Make all your pages first. It is called a sitemap. A sitemap is a map of your whole site. It can be done on a piece of paper, or you can actually do it right on the website. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build out 7 to 10 pages relatively quickly, because I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm just going to make a page, call it welcome, and click publish. In a minute, we're going to come back around to this welcome page, and I'm going to talk about all the different things that show up on the sidebar, up at the top. But for right now, I'm going to make a page called welcome and click publish. There is a kind of a 2-step publish here. This is what's called the pre-publish checks. And they're basically just making sure that the page that you're about to publish, you want it to be publicly available, and it should get published immediately. So you can obviously, we could change these, say, no, it's not public, it's private, or it's password protected. And we could say, don't publish it now, publish it next Tuesday. So for this, I'm going to click publish. That page is now live. There's nothing on it. That's not important right now. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to up top left. I'm going to click on this little WordPress W. And that's going to take me to the pages section with a list of all the pages that I've created. Now, as you can see, there's a couple pages in the system. There's already a privacy policy. This was added about a year and a half ago once the European GDPR Act came into place. It's kind of nice. It lets you automatically create a privacy policy. That is also an important thing these days for a lot of different reasons. Google wants to see you have a privacy policy. Google Adwords requires that you have a privacy policy, or at least encourages that. So it's a good thing to have on the site. And it just kind of creates a cookie cutter privacy policy. So I'm going to go through now and make the other pages. And it took me years to realize that all websites are kind of the same. They all have the same page names. Some have more, some have less. Some might call the home page home or welcome. It's about us or about me or about the team, but it's an about page. So I'm going to build out what is the standard sitemap that you would typically see. And so I started with the welcome page, and now I get to see the 3 different versions of add new. I have add new over here on the left. I have add new right here up top, and I have add new right there. All will go to the same spot and all will create a new page. So new page, now I've got about us. I'm going to click publish. I'm going to uncheck, for the sake of time, this always show pre-published checks. Once you uncheck that once, you'll never have to do it again, and it just speeds up. It's just one less click. So I made an about us page, back to pages, add new. And again, I'm gonna speed this up a little bit because I'm just doing the same exact thing over and over and over again. So welcome, about us, services, add new, gallery. You won't always have a gallery. You know, if you are a service-based business, you might not have a gallery. We don't, as a web company, we don't have a gallery. We have a, you know, meet the team page and a portfolio section. I'm gonna do a contact, and since I called it about us, I'll do contact us. I'm gonna make one called blog. Even if you don't intend on having a blog on your site, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but make a blog page, and you should have a blog. Even if you are intimidated by that term, if you think I'm never going to be a blogger, you don't have to call it blog, but you should come up with a name of a page that can be ongoing content. A lot of times, if clients are intimidated by the blog concept, we'll call it FAQs, or frequently asked questions. Something that's going to allow you to continuously publish content to your site. That's good for Google, that's good for users, it's good for a lot of reasons. All right, so we've got welcome, about, services, gallery, contact us. Let's maybe do another one. Let's call this meet the team. And then I'm going to do one final one. This one's going to be called Testimonials. And I think there's a spell checker built in here. Yep, it did it there. Yep. Yep, so there is a spell checker, which is kind of nice. Okay. I'm going to go back over to pages, just going to look over this list: about, blog, contact, gallery, meet the team, privacy policy. Sample page, we're going to just go ahead and trash that. I just hovered over it and clicked on the little trash button. There is a trash can. At least once a quarter, I have a client email or call, and they're in a panic that they somehow deleted every page on their entire website. And I have no idea how this constantly happens, but it does. But there's a trash can, so you can always go and just pull stuff out of the trash can. And then notice privacy policy is saved as a draft page. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go back into the, let's go to the contact page. So the next thing that I would do, so that first process there is just called make a sitemap. If you were to really kind of nail down these bullets of this process, if you want to follow it, the first thing we did there was we logged in, obviously. We created a user next. And then we basically made a bunch of pages that have the name of the menu, what we would want to see in the menu. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to show you the editor, the editing experience. And I'm going to do just a little bit here, and then we're going to jump over to the welcome page, and we're actually going to do a better job of building this out. But the next step in this process, in my opinion, should be add notes to yourself on these pages. Eventually, the contact us page needs to have a bunch of stuff that you're going to want on there. It's going to maybe have a form, phone number, email address, physical address, maybe a map, request a quote, a picture of the building. Like, it could be anything that you want this thing to be. But the important thing is to give yourself some notes, or as we call them, like breadcrumbs. So I just clicked in the box where it said start writing. I just clicked right in there. And so on the contact us page, we're going to have, I'm just going to put that stuff in: phone, email, physical address. And I'm just clicking the enter key, the return key, and it gives me the next little thing down. Maybe a map, and maybe a form. And then maybe social media links or feed. So the reason we're doing this is literally just to kind of give us a roadmap as we go back through and redo these pages. I'm a big fan of the whole assembly line process with this. And I think if you can focus on like the one task of like make all the pages, go back to the beginning, add all your notes, go back to the beginning, fill in those notes, or at least some of them. You can work your way through a site much quicker this way. All right, so I just created all of those different things. I want to talk about the editing experience for just a second. And for anybody that has worked with WordPress in the past, you'll know more about this than others about what I'm about to say. So about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, WordPress launched a new editor. Back in the day, 2 years ago and prior to that, we had what was called the WYSIWYG. And the WYSIWYG, I'm going to type it out here, stands for what you see is what you get. And the WYSIWYG was, and still is, it's an editor with a bunch of rows of buttons. It's kind of like what you see here, but with a whole lot more. It's kind of like what you would see if you opened up Word or Outlook or any other web editing program. And so it's basically a bunch of buttons that let you style the content: bold, italicize, color, font, paragraph, bullet, numbers, special characters. It's all that stuff. And for about 18 to 20 years, that's all that we really knew. And that's a shame, because the editing experience, it intimidated a lot of people. It was frustrating, myself included, and it was really difficult to get the site to look good and to look the way that you wanted it to do. If you ever tried to do this in the past and you ever tried to like put two pictures side by side, you literally could not put two pictures side by side. You would drag and drop, you would change alignment, you would try to like put a bunch of enters or spaces, and it was clunky. And then once mobile devices really hit the scene, once tablets, phones, all the different sizes of monitors and laptops, we as web designers all had to pivot and figure out how to build sites to be what's called responsive. So responsive design or a responsive site means that the website responds to whatever device is asking for it. So all these things kind of happen at once. People were getting frustrated with the WYSIWYG, mobile devices were coming on the scene, and we were all trying to scramble to figure out how to build sites to just work on an infinite number of devices, thanks Apple, and it was frustrating. And so WordPress, the company behind WordPress that kind of supports it, that brought it into this world, decided to tackle this task, this challenge of redesigning the editing experience. And so what they did was they created what's called Gutenberg. And these are Gutenberg blocks. So each block, as I click through, each one of these is a different block. And it created different blocks because I hit the return key, the enter key, at the very end of that word and the end of that word. If you don't hit the enter key, if you just hold shift, I'm holding shift and hitting enter, it's going to keep you in that same block, and you can add more content there. But you can add blocks in between, and you can reorganize things. But all of these right now are basic paragraph blocks. They're the most basic that it gets. You can basically put in text or a paragraph, and inside of that, you can do a couple more things. You can do a little bit of styling. I could make social media bold. I could click on links and actually make this a link. So if I highlight links, I click on the link icon here, I can type in a domain name, and it pops it up like, yep, that's it right there. And you click on it and it creates that little link. I could say open it in a new tab. So the cool thing now is that all the different blocks are specific to whatever type of content goes in that block. Let me say that again. The settings and the features and your ability to customize a block is specific to that block. And there are lots of different types of blocks based on the different types of content. There's video blocks and gallery blocks and text or paragraph blocks. There's shopping cart blocks. There's map blocks. Anything that you can think of, there's a block out there that exists to do it. And if it doesn't exist, wait a couple weeks or a month and somebody will make it. That's the other cool thing about WordPress and it being open source. Anybody can build anything and contribute it to this bigger ecosystem. Okay, so I'm going to save this page, and I do that by going up to the top right, and I just click on Update at the top right. Let's go ahead, and I don't want to dig into this right-hand sidebar yet. I want to go and jump over to the welcome page, and we're actually going to explore some of the blocks there. So I'm back over on the welcome page. Again, just like the other one, I can come through and I can say, you know, intro, content, about the business, maybe a team picture. Let's do value proposition, why we're different. And then maybe, you know, I don't know, like a Instagram feed or something, whatever the cool kids are using these days. All right, so, you know, again, just to reiterate the fact that add your notes to the different pages. We're getting ready to dig in and kind of do some other stuff here, but I'm going to go ahead and open up another tab, and I'm going to go to Coffee Ipsum. Side note while I grab this. So lorem ipsum is Latin text that is used, it's been around since like the 1400s, and it was used to test out printing presses and then later typewriters and things like that. It's gibberish in a sense, it's Latin text, I'm sure it does mean something, but it was used so often by so many folks that there's been a lot of offshoots of it. And so Coffee Ipsum is one of them. There's bacon ipsum and beer ipsum and mountain ipsum and any kind of ipsum that you can think of. It's basically just filler text to show you what the text is going to look like. And that's an important thing. So if your note on the welcome page says intro text goes here, I'll encourage you to go and paste in some content, whether it's your legitimate intro text or whether it's lorem ipsum or bacon ipsum or coffee ipsum or whatever you want to do. Because it's going to show you the balance, the layout, it's going to let you style the stuff. Most importantly, once we actually start looking at themes and changing the themes around, it's going to let you see what that theme does to your content. If anybody out on this call right now has ever tried to build a site, specifically a WordPress site, you got through the process of like getting it set up on hosting, and then the next thing that you did is immediately went and tried to find a theme, and maybe you even bought a theme and you loaded that theme on your empty website and it just sucked and you were just so disappointed. It's because there was no content. It's really important to have content on your site so that you can see how it's going to get styled out once that theme wraps all around it and changes the color and the fonts and the layout and all that kind of stuff. It's really important to have something on those pages. So again, I just created another paragraph block. I can align text in certain ways. There's a couple extra things down here, but not many. There is text color. You'll notice that font is not an option on here. Font is something that's governed by the theme. Again, themes style the whole site. So I do want to call out the right-hand section of this panel before we dig deeper into all the different blocks. So right now, my cursor is active in this paragraph block. And if I go over on the right, I see right there, it is a paragraph block. And I have settings specific to that block. There's some defaults. I can set the font different sizes. I can do custom. I can do a drop cap, which makes that first letter large like that. There's color settings that are specific to that text. You can do that inside of this block as well, but you can do this as like the entire block if you wanted to. You can also set the background color of that block. And the cool thing, it's again, like this is huge for me because I've been living in this WordPress world for 15 years. But if this is the first time you're digging in this, you're like, yeah, whoop-de-doo. But the fact that the styling that you select shows up on the left is a really big deal. The fact that it's a live editing experience and it actually brings the fonts and the colors in, that's the biggest reason why the WYSIWYG was so frustrating back in the day. It's because what you see is what you get couldn't have been more false. What you see on the screen was like nothing like what it was going to actually be like, and that was in itself just very frustrating. And then the other thing I'll point out is that if I click outside of this block, this right-hand column is going to default back to document. And this is where I'm going to get the settings and the settings that are specific to this page and not specific to a block. If I click over on block, it's going to say like, hey, you don't have a block selected, select a block, and then it's going to give me the settings specific to that. All right, here. I'm going to go through and show you a couple different blocks right now. So I'm going to come down here and let's click out of this block. And I'm going to, again, show you kind of another way that you can add blocks. So at the top left, I'll click the plus sign. And now I've got all these different blocks that show up. There is some coaching text that shows up over here on the right, but essentially we can scroll through. And the really cool thing, and this is just added in the past couple of months, I think, within WordPress, is that as you hover, it's going to show you what type of block that is, if it can. So for instance, quote shows the quote. It can't show you anything for audio, it just is what it is. There's a list. These are all really basic. We can come down to common blocks. We've got paragraph, image, list, gallery, headings, cover, which is pretty cool. And I'm gonna show you the cover. Cover is it's an easy block to kind of up your game as far as the design is concerned, and it has some cool features that are built into it. So let's go ahead and pick cover block. So cover block, you can think of this as the very front and center top section of your homepage. You can put it on any page, but a lot of sites these days, when you go to it, there's this one main photo, there's some welcome text. Maybe it's got like a cool parallax feature that has like multiple planes with the image and the text that kind of float. So we're gonna kind of explore this one specific block. So cover block, upload an image or video, or pick one from the media library. I could click on upload and upload something here. I hopefully have images that I've added to this. So if I click on media library, so I've added some images in here. You can't go wrong with stock photos of puppies. So it took us a while to realize that if you load a client's website full of stock puppy photos, they quickly realize that they need to give you photos. If you load it full of mountain scenes, they say, well, those aren't our mountains. Those aren't my products, but puppies are easier to handle. So I'm going to pick this city, this Asheville city skyline. All of these images, the backgrounds, the puppies, the button, all those, they'll be in the test site that you get. They're all legitimate photos that we have purchased at one point, so they're legit for you to play with. So I'm going to pick that mountain scene, the Asheville, probably a couple years old, based on that crane tearing down the BBT building. But so I typed that, or I pasted that that image in there. And there I can just put in some intro text. That's probably not what I would put on the home page, but just to show you background image, text on top. And then what I'm going to do is, as you can see, the reason I picked this block is because it lets us explore a few different layouts of blocks. This one actually is like a block inside of a block. So it gets us into this first slight level of, the name of this block is a cover block, cover, like the cover of a book. This is a block inside of a block. So we're looking at the text block that is inside of the cover block. And I know that because over on the right, again, I have paragraph. I've got all the same stuff I saw before. I can increase that size. I can do drop cap, which will look really weird there. So I'll go back to large. But if I click onto the picture, I'm now back onto, I kind of zoomed up a level and I'm now back to the cover block. And here I've got some pretty cool settings that I'm going to show you because these are kind of neat. And they're, again, this is a basic block, but it kind of gives you the glimpse of how far these things can go. So fixed background, that's what you can consider, the true term for that is parallax. The parallax design is when you have text and a picture and they float independently from each other. And you might even see, multiple layers of this within WordPress in this block. It just gives you the two, the image and the text. But as you can see, as I scroll, it looks like the image is pinned to the background and then the text floats on top of it. The other thing that I can come over here is I could set like minimum height dimensions and I could pick overlays of the image. Before I do that, I want to come back over to the main window here. And I want to look at this. I'm sorry, this one right here, the change alignment. So right now we've got an alignment, but there's two new options. So typically you would think of alignment as push it left, push it center, push it right. But this actually talks about whether it's like this big or all the way. And so I could do a wide width, which is pretty cool, or I could actually do full width. And this is what a lot of sites these days are built around. It's this concept of the full bleed. It comes from like the print world, but when, if you have a business card and the color goes all the way to the edge, that's a full bleed. So websites these days, a lot of times are set up with this full bleed concept where it pushes the content all the way to the side. That was also a change that happened when everybody started building responsive sites because you don't know the size of the device, just go all the way to the edge, just push 100% all the way. So now that I've got this, maybe I can bump up this text larger and really like, why don't I just make this huge? Let's go with like 60, big text. I can click back on the cover area, and now I've got some other settings over here on the right that I want to do. So I can do an overlay, and so right now I can show you that there's a little bit of an overlay, and it's basically just a black overlay. But I can change this to go. I can change the opacity of it, but also I could change the overall color of it. If black is too intense for that, then I can go down to like more of a tan. Obviously, if I did something like this, I would then want to click back inside, and then I might want to do something like, color settings, and then change the text color to black. And then that would look a little bit better. And that's starting to look kind of cool. The other thing I can do in here, last little bit on this, is if I turn off the fixed background, if I don't want to use that, there is this little focal point picker, and here I can adjust the actual image. So to me, like, that's pretty cool if the buildings weren't there. That's just a really nice mountain scene. But since those buildings are there, we might as well just go back to the center. And this can be a little frustrating sometimes, so you might just have to manually adjust those. So that's looking pretty good. And all right, let's move on to the next thing. I'm going to come down here and I want to add another block. Again, I'm going to click up at the top, new block. And let's keep looking through. Let's do a gallery because that's typically something that a lot of folks are going to want. You typically wouldn't put this directly below as like your second item, but we'll go ahead and put this in here. So I'm going to click on gallery block. Much like the cover block, I can upload an image or I can go to media library. going to pick all these adorable puppies. I'm just going to click through and grab them all. So as I click on it, it adds a little check mark. One of the things that I'm kind of bummed about in the shortening of this is I typically spend like 10 to 15 minutes talking about images, image names, image sizes, all that stuff. I don't really have time to do that. I'm going to give you the real quick condensed version of it. Always name your images. Name your images. Like literally change the file name on your computer before you upload it to the website. And you can just, if you're on a PC, you can click F2. You click on that picture and click F2. I don't know what it is on a Mac. Change the file name. As you can see at the top right of this, the name of this is Dog Running in Snow Golden 800. The next most important thing, name your images, number one. Number two is don't use spaces. So as you see, there's no spaces in the name of that file. Pull the spaces out and either replace it with a dash, an underscore, or do what I did there called camel case, where you capitalize the first letter of each word. Number three, the biggest size that you ever need for an image is like 1,400 pixels. That Asheville city skyline image is 1,400. And if I were to click on this image, you would see that I put 1,400 in the name of the file. Just like there's 800 in the name of this one, that's 800 pixels wide. But for big gallery, or I'm sorry, for big header images or background images, those can be like 1,400 to 1,500 pixels. But for regular images that are just going to go into the body of your content or into a gallery, 800 is about as big as you might need it. And then the last thing on this, maximum file size, you should try to keep it under 100 kilobytes. So this image, for instance, right now that I've selected is 66 kilobytes. So 100 kilobytes maximum, 1,400 pixels maximum. Don't put spaces in the name, and name the file. Naming the file is one of those instances of crafting your long tail terms and a place that you could put those long tail terms where it actually helps. Okay, super condensed version of that, but that's important stuff. So I've got these images selected. I'm going to say create a new gallery. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 pictures. Good. I could go in here and put captions down below if I wanted to. I can drag and drop these things in different orders. I'm going to say insert gallery. And now I have, let me scroll down. Now again, I have settings on the right specific to the gallery block. I have this column layout. Since I've got 8 images, it auto sizes these images to fit for the 3 columns. If I go up to 4 column, it'll trim them down 4 even columns with even images. Or again, I could go bigger with it. I could do a straight column straight down, whatever I want to do there. I'm going to go with 2, and then I'm going to change this to a wide width. And now that I see that, I'm going to go down to 4 with a wide width on the sizing. A question from Lynn. The person doing my website has cut off all my product pictures and told me she couldn't do anything because it's a template and the photos I took are the wrong size. If you took the photos yourself, like literally with a camera or a phone, I guarantee they're way bigger than anything that you need. If they've been cropped down, that's slightly different, and that's a bummer. And I would again go try to find those original versions of those. Yeah, so a factor related to, let me answer that. Let me finish that one first. So yeah, if you took them with your phone, they are probably a couple thousand pixels, so they should be fine. They might be fuzzy in the sense that you didn't use a tripod or you had dirt on your lens or that kind of thing. That happens. So maybe that's what it was, and they need to be shrunk down to kind of not see the fuzziness of it. Yeah, and then we'll discuss the factors to consider about images in relation to the load speed of the page, in particular loading on mobile devices. Yes, so the main reason why I stress the sizing of images, in particular the kilobyte or megabyte size, not the pixel size, is because the bigger the images and the more there are, the slower your website goes. There is a website called GT Metrics, and I will paste this in the chat. And it is a great tool. It's a little intense the first time that you look at it. You're like, well, I don't know what I'm looking at. There's a lot of stuff, but it's a really cool tool, and it will show you, it'll tell you why your images are, or sorry, why your site loads slowly or why it loads quickly. And it's a great tool. It's free to use. You paste your domain name in, it'll scan through it, and it'll come back and it's like, these 12 images are way too big. And then also, here's the optimized version of the image. So it tells you which ones are too big, but it also gives you the trimmed down, optimized version of it. So it's a really cool free tool. So yeah, you want to try to keep your site low on the load time, and the way that you do that is, in other words, you want it to load quickly, and so the way that you do that is by making sure your images are compressed down and that you're not just throwing, 2 megabyte files at your site. That's also the problem with videos that automatically play and load, is videos are really tough to trim down. So I've got my gallery in place here. Last thing I want to do as we wrap up this gallery block, over here we've got link to. And what this means is, where should it link when somebody clicks on the image? And so attachment page is not a great idea. That's going to link to a whole nother page. It basically creates a standalone page for every image in the gallery. I wouldn't do that. Media file is going to let you, I'll go ahead and I'll select that. And that's going to, when somebody clicks on it, it's going to link to the bigger version. And in this case, all of these images are 800 pixels wide. So I've got that in there. I'm going to go ahead and click update. I'm going to add one more block. I'm speeding up a little bit if you didn't notice. I got some other stuff I want to show you. One of the other ones here is layout elements. And here I can create columns. So now I can say, hey, I want 3 columns, they're evenly split. And inside of each column, I can then put in a specific thing. So I could put, for instance, an image inside of each column. Let's do this. Let's do a PDF button. And this will help me illustrate something else here. So obviously you would rarely ever need 3 download my PDF buttons, one after another. But if we did, one thing that we can do here is, if I click on this download PDF, this is also in that media manager. I can come over here and I can click on these 3 little blocks, come down towards the bottom, and I can say add to reusable blocks. This is also really, really cool. So this is, I'm going to call this my download, call it my PDF download. So this is really helpful if you are wanting to make content that exists on multiple pages throughout your site, and you want them all to be the same content, whether that's a link or an image or a style or whatever it is. And so now I should be able to now I clicked in the second block, it came down to the bottom, and I've got this reusable block. And now I can say, yep, it's PDF, same thing here, yep, PDF. And now I have created those 3 that all drop in there. Just like with the cover block, when you add columns, you can put multiple blocks inside of those columns. So that's why I see these other little block icons down here, is that PDF icon shows up there, but also I'm going to have the ability to add more blocks into the mix. I'm going to plug in my laptop before I lose everybody. Okay. So I've got that column there. That's great. I'm going to go in, I'm going to add one more block. This time I'm going to come down here to layout elements, and I'll do one called media and text. This is simple, but it's essentially the ability to put a picture on the left. We'll go in, we'll pick one of these dog photos again. That's all I got. Over here on the content, I wonder if I've still got embedded that. I didn't have the copy Epsom anymore. I'm gonna try to undo that one, and then I'll come in here and just put content goes here. And so notice those sizings are different. When you add this type of block, it is, it's going to put a title up top, and then it's going to put like paragraph content down below. And so notice right up here, we've got a lot of different options for how things get aligned and laid out. I can choose different alignment vertically. I can choose to flip the image, flip these things around. This is stuff that used to just be such a pain, and it was so time consuming to deal with. And when a client's like, can we just switch those around? It was like, oh no, we can't do that. That's an hour. And now it's just like, boop. So these things are have gotten much simpler. Lynn, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, it is recorded. And so I don't know the details about how that goes out. I assume that Dwayne will send a link to everybody. He also said that he was going to send it to me. So I'm going to do a blog post sometime in the next day or two that has links and stuff that I mentioned. And then I'll also put a link to the recording of this as well. All right, moving on. We got 16 minutes left. Okay, I'm gonna do one more block here, and it's gonna be an embed block. And I'm gonna use a YouTube embed. And this is kind of cool. So you can just go over to, let's just do google.com. And we'll keep with the puppy theme. Puppy video. Great video here. I grab that URL. And the cool thing these days with YouTube videos and a lot of content is you can just paste the video, click embed, and it will do everything for you. It is completely legitimate to grab any video from YouTube and embed it onto your site. That is not true when it comes to images. That was probably that's my last bullet point, 5 or 6 with images. Don't steal images. You will one day get caught by Getty Images, and you will get a big giant fine probably. Just ask your friends that are photographers, take the pictures yourself, whatever the case might be. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and update this page, and I need to cover one last really important thing. A couple things here. So, you would add Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, so there are Instagram and Facebook blocks that are in place. If I do another embed, and also the other thing I can do here is I can just type. And so like there, I just typed in Facebook. There's a Facebook block, and then it says, well, what's your Facebook URL? I don't know necessarily what that's going to embed, whether it's your feed or a number of posts or what kind of functionality you've got there. But the cool thing is that there's all these plugins out there that extend the capabilities of WordPress and let you do other things and more advanced things with all these different blocks. So I want to go ahead and update. This next little bit is important, and I got to do it quickly. So if I, at this point, double check, make sure I've updated. If I go to the front of the website, I still have, there's 2 things that we need to do now. The first thing is that we need to build a menu. We need to build a logical menu. There's a menu up there, but it's not in order. Nothing is nested, nothing's a submenu. So that's one thing that we need to do. The other thing we need to do is set the welcome page, in my case, I called it welcome, as the home page. So these 2 things I need to do quickly so that I always make sure I cover these 2 things. So if I go over to the admin side, and this is something that you might want to write a note down about. If you haven't taken any notes, these next 2 things you might want to jot down. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come down to settings and reading. And under settings reading, at the very top is where I can select what page should show as my home page. So I'm going to say, and so by default, WordPress, it says show your latest posts, because WordPress is a blogging platform from the beginning. But in this case, I want a website. So I'm going to say I want a static page. My home page is my welcome page. And my posts page, in this case, is going to be the blog page. So what I've done is I've just set the home page to be the welcome page. So WordPress is now going to load the welcome content. And the second thing there is I told WordPress, hey, if there's any blog posts in the system, put those on the blog page. And I'll save those changes. And I'll view the site. And there I have my welcome text, that lorem ipsum. There's my welcome to my site. There's our gallery that links to the bigger version. There's our little PDF buttons. We didn't actually link those to anything, but the linking of those buttons is the exact same. You just click on the button, click the little chain link, and then it gives you a link to go to content. And then there's our YouTube video. If I click through, I can click to all these pages. Up, blog page, there is our one blog post, Hello World. So we know that it is pinned. This post is pinned to the blog page. Contact, there's our notes that we had before. And I don't think we put anything else on any other pages. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to set the menu. And we do this by going to Appearance, Menus. This process is pretty straightforward. They try to coach you through it. So give your menu a name, then click Create Menu. Well, we'll call it Main Menu and Create Menu. Now we have like an empty bucket. We've got a bucket for these menu items to go into. And so I'll come over here and I'll view all. And I'll say, yep, I want all of these menu items to show up over here. I selected them all. I clicked Add to Menu. And now this is just a drag and drop interface. So welcome or home is always first. About is typically second. Contact is typically last. Blog comes just before contact. Maybe Meet the Team is underneath About Us. Maybe Testimonials is underneath Gallery. I'm sorry, Services. And let's move Services up. And so notice what I just did here is, let me get that in there correctly. To make something a sub item, all I did was grab it and just drag it to the right a little bit until that dotted line bumps over, and then I let go. And then you do the same thing to get it back. So by these two items being sub items, they're going to show up as sub drop-down menus. So real quick recap there. We made a menu. We added the menu items from the left to the right, and then we just organized them how we wanted them. And then the last thing we have to do here is down here at the bottom, display location is the desktop horizontal menu. I don't know why they make it that complicated, but they do. So desktop horizontal across the top is going to be the main menu that we want. Yeah, the menu are the tabs across the header. And so we save the menu. And now with any luck, when we go view the front of the website, we've got a welcome page, we've got our menu. There's our About Us, there's Meet the Team, you can jump through. So we just kind of blasted through and we just created the whole structure. We did all the pages, we built the menu, we set the home page, we explored the blocks. And then the other thing I'll mention here is that now we have this in place, now that we have all these pages and we have the menu, now on whatever page we get to, up at the top of that page is an edit page button. So as we navigate through the menu, we can come up here and click edit page. We get to the editing side of this page. We can add a block. This is the gallery page, so we'll add a gallery. Here's another puppy gallery. And there we go. Once we save it, we can then go back to the front of the site, or we could come up here and click preview, and that'll actually take us to a previewed version of that. That is one thing that I mentioned, I just kind of blasted through that, but you can preview a page before you publish a page. If you want to kind of look to see what it's going to look like for visitors, you can do that without having to publish it. You can also save it as a draft if you want to come back and work on it later. So right here up at the top as well, you can, this has already been published. So because it's already published, we have to switch it to a draft. But if I go ahead and do that, now I get my publish button back, or I get my save draft button. Is there a way to add text while hovering over photos? Yes. So if I go back into this gallery, and we'll go back into the media library. When we were on this screen, when we were actually building out this, this is where we would put in, under the caption section, we would put in some text here, and that's going to add some text. In this case, it's going to add the text directly on top of the photo. I know what you mean by when you hover over a picture and it kind of pops up. Those are typically going to be handled as an alt tag. So if I were to come back into this, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit here, but I'm gonna edit this gallery and I'm gonna click on one of these pictures. So I went back into where I, kind of the second step of the gallery creation process. Over here on the right is where I would create puppy image. And so over here, I put in a caption, and that actually shows up on top of the image. But a lot of times the alt text, which is really important for optimization as well. Again, one more opportunity to put in some of those long tail terms. The alt text is where you're going to put the text that will show when you hover over the photo. And if I update this and publish this, we will hopefully see that. This theme might not show that. It does not. The hovered text. But on some themes, hovering over a picture will pop up with that alt text. Yeah, the alt text is definitely what Google reads for SEO, search engine optimization purposes. It is one of the biggest and most prominent SEO factors that's out there. So especially related to images. When you go to work with images, there's alt text, there's the title, there's the caption, there's the description. The alt text and the image name are by far the most important thing. All right, so those are the main last big things I wanted to cover. So, but now what we're getting ready to do is I'm going to show you backups, plugins, and or plugins and themes real quickly. Best practices on alt text while I do this. Alt text should be an actual statement that can be read out to a blind user. So if an image is of a cute puppy in the field, cute puppy playing in the field is a very appropriate alt tag to put there. Over on the plugins side of stuff, if you shoot me an email and you want one of these development sites, you'll get all the plugins are already loaded in there. I will put a list of all the plugins in the blog post that I do about this, but real quick to kind of just run through the list of plugins that are on here. Classic Editor brings back the WYSIWYG. So if you do want a WYSIWYG interface, if you're not cool with the block thing, you can turn on this Classic Editor. Cloner will not be on there. That's the ability for me to clone out the sites. Crazy Egg, Google Analytics, and ManageWP are three services that you can link your website to. Crazy Egg is the heat map tool. Analytics does Google Analytics, and ManageWP is a free service that will daily, it'll keep tabs on your site and make sure that it's up to date. Plugins, core, and the theme constantly need to be updated. And so it's a pretty cool free service that runs all those updates for you. These next couple, these are all free plugins. Ninja Forms is pretty straightforward. It lets you make a simple contact form. Or a really robust form, whatever you want. Smush is a plugin that's there because we are all bad at remembering to resize images. So Smush will keep an eye as you upload images, and it'll constantly kind of crush images down and try to optimize them as much as possible. Updraft Plus is the plugin that does backup and restore, and it's the plugin that you or I will use to move your website to its final destination. And I'll go look at that in just one second, but then the last one here is Yoast SEO. It's the most popular SEO plugin out there. and it essentially gives you more abilities to optimize your site. And so then let me jump to Settings Updraft Plus. This is that backup plugin. Let me do this real quick, and then I'll answer these couple questions that just popped in. And I'm not going to cut everybody off in 2 minutes. I'm fine to hang out for a little bit. Updraft Plus, again, this is the backup and restore plugin. You can come in here and right out of the box, you can just say backup the site. And you click backup twice, and it just runs through and it creates a backup file. You can then take this backup and you can restore the backup at whatever location it's going to. So if you get one of these temp sites, these dev sites for me, you build it out a week or two or a month later, you say, hey, Boomer, I'm ready to move this thing. I've got an account at Siteground, and how do I get it there? I'm going to go into your site. I'm going to run a backup. I'm going to go over to the new site. I'll load this exact same plugin, upload the backup, and then just click the restore button, and it will take all of your stuff from over here and deploy it over there. And then you've got kind of two versions, and then you can go live with the new version of the site. As you can see, it's just running through. That took about a minute or so. Backup has been finished, cool. And then down here, I have a snapshot of, it was this date, this time, here's the things that it backed up. And the cool thing about this, and you really should, you need to have a backup plugin. And the cool thing about this plugin specifically is it lets you restore. And so, you know, imagine you're working on this daily, this list can be every single day. And if you go in on that 15th day and you mess something up, you can just roll it back to the day before. And specifically with this plugin, you can roll back just certain pieces of it. So if you go in and you just mess up your theme, you can roll just that one back. So, yep, great question. Can you do this automatically? On the settings tab, here's where you can say, I want to back up the files every month and store 2 versions. And I want to back up the database every day and store 30. So that would essentially give me 2 months of files, and the files are all the images and PDFs and all that kind of stuff. And then the database is where all the text and the links and all that kind of stuff, all the text and the settings and all that goes. So, and files are big, databases are small. So you can set a daily backup for the database, and that's perfectly fine. It's like a megabyte here or there. All the files that make up the whole site might be, you know, 100 or 200 megabytes. So you don't really want to be like emailing a 100 megabyte file to yourself and clogging up your email. And so down here, it lets you pick what the mechanism is for where it's going to be stored. Most of you probably have either a Dropbox or a Google Drive folder. We have really robust backup systems because we do this for a living. And so we've got a lot of clients that rely on us to keep track of this stuff. So we have a system where we back up the files every week, and we store 8 weeks of those. So we have 2 months of file backups, and then we do a daily backup of the database, and we store that for 60 days. So we have 2 months. So as long as a client contacts us within 2 months of messing up their site or something happening, we've got backups. And then before we truly purge all that stuff out, I take a big backup every 2 months, and then that gets pushed to a little box over in the corner over there. So backups are really important. You don't really realize it until the day comes where you don't have one and you really, really need one. All right, let me backtrack a little bit. Question about how do we make sure that the website is good for mobile? So the easiest way to do this is to go to the website. Well, the first thing is to make sure you build your site with a theme that is responsive. And any theme that's built in the past like 5 years is going to be responsive. But as you browse through themes and you look out online at themes, just make sure that it says somewhere in there that it's responsive. Most of them should be. But the way to test it, to see if your site is actually responsive, is to do this. If you decrease, I think I have the screen share set as my entire monitor, hopefully, and it's not just going to change the little viewport here, I think. But so as I just scale this down, I just grab the right-hand sidebar, and as I start scaling, you'll see that what happens is we hit these different breakpoints. And a breakpoint is where the site content breaks and shifts. And so you can see this right now in the menu. Like I get a little bit further, and then right there, we hit a breakpoint. That's probably a tablet. And now the menu gets condensed to this mobile menu. And I can keep going, and that's still the same type of menu. This, you can see this even better if I come down here to some content and I start scaling. We'll see that the images scale, they keep on going. At some point it drops those 3 columns into 2, into 1, and we get down to a smaller view down here. Is there a way to put the same text, like a phone number, on every page without having to input it separately on each page? Yes. Again, that is specific to the theme. So a lot of sites, we've covered pretty much everything as far as the basics except themes. So I'll spend the next couple of minutes. We'll run till maybe we'll do like another eight or so minutes of this. The theme that I have active right now is one of the built-in themes. If I close down these other windows and I go back to the admin side and I go to appearance, here we've got a whole bunch of themes that are loaded. The theme that we have is called 2020. If I come over here and I activate, let's say 2017, and now if I look at the front of the website, it's been rewrapped with a whole new theme. We have our same block of text. There's our cover photo. There's our gallery, PDFs, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't look great because we created all that inside of this one particular theme. And this is also an older theme. So it is responsive, but it's not as good with that. Likewise, if I come over here and I do 2016, 2016 was actually a pretty good year for themes, but we get a very minimal looking theme. These are boring and basic by design because they want you to focus on the content. Again, like there's no space there, so we'd want to go in and kind of rework some of these different blocks, but the content itself is still there and it's still for the most part intact. There is always cleanup. So for anybody out there, I forget who it was on the chat that had a site built by somebody else, there's a theme. I don't know what theme it is, but there's a theme active on it. To do a major like overhaul of the visuals of the site, you're looking at basically changing your theme to something else. And then that's a really quick and easy process. But what's tedious, you got to go page by page and figure out what's not lined up anymore, what needs padding above or below. Is it responsive or not? And for the most part, most themes these days are going to be very responsive. If I go in and I pick something random that was built by just somebody out there, I'll pick this one. I'll come over here and I'll refresh. A little bit more elegant, kind of looks like almost like a newspaper type of site, the gallery page. Not bad. But what you're looking at when you pick a theme is obviously it needs to be responsive, but look at the layout of stuff. The header, is there a search box? Where does it go? The header, the footer, and the sidebar are really the main things. Like this footer down here, and to get back to the question, Yates's question about a piece of content that shows up in a lot of places, those pieces of content that are that follow through the whole website, every page, you're typically going to put those in as a widget. And as you can see in this theme, they clearly define, they've got 3 widget spots. And here I could come in here and I could add a widget, and that could be a contact form. This one could be physical address, phone number, email. And then this third one might be, social media links or newsletter sign up or something like that. We'll do one more theme here, and let's pick this one. So this one's got this big giant header with a background color in there. It's kind of a boxed out layout, slightly old school looking design, but not too bad. This monitor, I don't know what you guys are seeing on yours, but it's a big monitor. It's like a 36-inch monitor, and so it's squished this into like a very small area of the site. but I have a 13-inch laptop down here, so it would be completely different if I drag this down. I'm going to pick this one, and I'm just going to go into this customizer. And so the customizer exists across the board for all themes, but the abilities or the settings that are built into the customizer, they change based on the theme. So if you go into your customizer, it will be completely unique to whatever theme you have active on your site. But so in this case, I've got this general layout, and that's going to say what's the primary color. Sorry, I just had a massive hornet fly right in front of my screen here. I'm back. All right. So I can drag this around and pick a different color, and that might change the accent color that's applied to these different buttons and these lines that get put in place. I'll come down here to header. Now I've got different buttons that could be added into the header. There's a button, and the color for that should be hideous red here. And then there's another button. So that was for the text, and then this one's for the link. That's not actually going to show up anywhere, so that's fine. There's a right button. And so these are what would be considered call to action buttons. And so this theme, as this and other themes, wouldn't have it. Here's current header, and I can say, yeah, I don't want that header. I want to use that picture of Asheville. And crop it down to that. I've never worked with this theme, so I'm just kind of on the fly doing this. And again, that's kind of the process with this. Unfortunately, remember I mentioned earlier, you get to this point and like it just scatters. So everybody's picking a different theme, and it's going in different directions, and different plugins affect things differently. And this is where it becomes really difficult to teach folks as a group, because you have your own vision of what your site's going to look like. And this doesn't look great by any standpoint, but you might right off the bat say, I don't want a big header image. I want a real clean, slim top bar with my logo, and then I want to get to the content. And so if that's the case, this is not the theme. My biggest piece of advice when it comes to themes is be critical. Be critical about them. If you load a theme, you activate it. If there's no instruction on what to do next, if you're completely in tears because you click on something that doesn't do anything, don't fight it. Change to another theme. There are hundreds of thousands of themes out there, and it's not worth wasting time and frustration, for that matter, trying to just fight against one of these themes. Just move on. These themes are built by different people all around the world with different, coding backgrounds and different goals in mind. Some of these are 100% free. Others might have like a paid version that will unlock new features and will, they'll give you a support system. They'll give you like a knowledge base or a forum that you can ask questions on. So be critical and move through them until you find the one that you really want. This one, for instance, I just noticed, view the pro features. So if we go over to pro, this all of a sudden will jump to some other site, and their site was down. So that's not a good sign. One theme that I will mention as we wrap this up that we use often, it's a theme called Divi. And if I go to appearance, you'll see that it's in here. Divi is a really great theme. I don't make any money from Divi. We give them a lot of money. They should give us some money, but Divi's really cool. And it's a paid theme. It's not free. I want to say it's like $80 and $90 for a year, or it's $250 one-time lifetime deal. My guess is during COVID, they're probably running some kind of big special. And the really cool thing that I'll show you real briefly on this Divi theme, and we'll wrap up with this. Avada is another really popular theme. Avada, somebody just mentioned Avada. With Divi, the cool thing, and a few themes have this, I think Avada might have it, but I can do what's called enable the visual builder on this service page. And Divi comes preloaded with like 1,100 different pages and different layouts specifically. And so these layouts are organized into packs. And so I can, right here in the middle, I can say I want to choose from a pre-made layout. And then I go into this layout, and imagine these as like little mini themes inside of Divi. And so each theme is unique to a specific industry, but it doesn't have to be. You obviously get to change out the pictures, the text, and move things around. And so if I were going to come down here and say, you know, let's go with this handyman one. And so inside of the handyman layout pack, there's an about page design, there's a blog design, there's a services page. And so since we're doing the services page, I'll pick this one. I'll say use this layout. It doesn't actually take a minute. It doesn't do anything for the first couple seconds, and then it blasts through the rest of it. And the cool thing about this is that it's what you could call rapid prototyping. I was a product designer by trade before I got into the web. And the concept of like rapid prototyping, we now have through 3D printing. And this is kind of the equivalent for web design. You can very quickly find a style and a theme and a layout, and you can create a page, load the layout, save it, move on, make another page, load that specific layout, move on. And it allows you to really quickly get a 5 to 6 to 10 page site loaded without a whole lot of heartache. I will say this, for anybody that's like, oh, this is great, I'm just gonna do this. Divi has its own learning curve. If you're learning WordPress and you instantly stack the Divi learning curve on top of it, it's very frustrating. So it might be the kind of thing that you want to get in, work on your content, play around with some stuff first, and then maybe go look at some Divi demos and things like that. But as you can see, it just finished loading. I've got this pretty cool looking cut line that runs across this. I've got my little rule of 3. And Divi works in a similar way that WordPress does with Gutenberg. Each one of these is a block. I can drag and drop, and I can move these blocks around. I can just hover, pick the little crosshair thing, and just drag it somewhere else. I can clone something, just like creating the reusable blocks. I can just clone all 3 of those. I can come down and I can click inside of one of these, and I can change the text. It's got these pre-built little accordions that open up. And then the other thing is I can clone an entire section, but I can also drag entire sections up or down, which is really cool to be able to just completely manipulate your entire site. And to reference that Crazy Egg tool, the heat mapping tool, if you track your site and you realize that people aren't making it real low down onto your site, you can just drag the important stuff up top and you don't have to recreate it. Gutenberg does that as well with the block ability to drag and drop blocks. But this just kind of adds another layer to it. And it's just one of these things that when I talk to other web designers and they find out I teach these classes and what I try to, you know, roll out, and they're like, you teach them Divi? You tell them you tell them about those secrets? It's not a secret. Like nothing on the internet's a secret these days. And I'm excited that the internet and web design has gotten to a point where things are drag and drop. And as you see, we have looked at no code in the past 2 hours. There has been not a single bit of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, or anything. It's all been behind the scenes. And to me, as a non-developer operating in the web world, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't have tools like this. And in my opinion, this is not cutting corners in any way. This is a way to kind of quickly cut through some of the heartache and the really difficult parts and really get to a level where you can feel better about the site and about the design. And ultimately, this is a means to an end. The goal is to get a site up and running that you're proud of, that you can drive traffic to. And then you enter into the real exciting part, which is tracking the site, getting phone calls, getting emails, getting contact forms. I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is create a really finely tuned tool. And not to say as quick as we can get there, the better, but if we don't have to fight against a really difficult, clunky theme, and we can use something like this, it's in a lot of cases, it's worth the 80 to 90 bucks, you know, to have something that's a really proper Swiss Army knife to serve this goal. So I'm going to end with that. It's at 5:20. Everybody should have my email address. It's easy. It's boomer@bigboomdesign. We're typically, our office is over on Haywood Road in West Asheville. I was there this morning grabbing stuff to fill up my space here. But once all this craziness is over, come visit us sometime. Keep an eye on the AV Tech calendar, as well as our website, bigboomdesign.com. I post all of our classes on there. I'm teaching another one on Thursday through Southwestern Community College, I believe. The Southwestern Community, Blue Ridge Community, Asheville, AV Tech are all ones. And thanks for all the folks that hung in there and the questions. And if you had any questions that you didn't want to ask, feel free to shoot me an email. I didn't get a chance to run through SEM Rush, which is really cool. But if you come back for the analytics class, which should be listed on our website under solutions classes, we try to stay pretty active with that. And you can find all of our upcoming classes. I'll jump over to that one. Yeah, feel free to shoot me any questions. And these days we're getting kind of bombarded with a lot of questions and a lot of stuff. That's fine. Bear with me if it takes me a day or two to get back to you. Feel free to shoot it to me. I always try to get through my inbox, but sometimes it takes me a little longer than I would like. So under solutions on our site, there's classes menu items. So thanks everybody. Appreciate you hanging in there, and everybody stay healthy and happy and optimistic about the future.